to another episode of Tearing Up Your Bible. I have my tea, I have my Bible, we are ready to go. Today we're going to be talking about two different topics. We want to talk about why you would want to mark up your Bible in the first place. And if you're feeling some hesitancy to open up a brand new Bible and make your first markings, then we want to give you a way or reasons to get over that hesitancy. So to talk about why you would want to mark up your Bible, there's going to be four reasons. And the first one is it helps with memory. The more that you interact with any material, the more likely you are to remember it. Now, you can interact with it by highlighting or making cross-references or making up outlines for a book or underlining a theme that runs throughout the book or writing about those passages in a notebook. If you've been wondering how is it that your preacher memorizes so many passages, this is the reason why. He interacts with these passages on a daily basis. The more that he reads about them and marks them up and notates them and writes about them for lessons, the more that that gets ingrained in his memory. That same thing happens for you. The more that you notate and underline and write about it in a notebook, the more that you're going to remember those passages as well. The second reason is it is good for deeper study. You are able to connect ideas sometimes by making a notation here and then going over a page or two and recognizing, oh, well, this passage and this passage, they're very, very similar. Or this passage and this passage, they sound very similar or they go together really well. It helps you to pay attention to the context and it makes you reflect on the passages through the notes that you write. It does so much more than just reading the text. This is an age-old help to understand and to apply these passages. Ever since manuscripts have been made of biblical books, people have been writing notes in the margin to help them have a deeper study for it. The third reason is that it keeps the study material for another time. After reading through a passage and making all your notes and understanding it as thoroughly as you can, why not keep all that work already into the text itself? So the next time you pick it up, you don't have to go back and make all the same conclusions. You can work from that conclusion and all the work that you've done previously and take your Bible study to the next level. Those are all really great things to do. Instead of refurnishing a foundation for your understanding, take that foundation that you already had and then build upon it the next time you open up that passage. The fourth reason is that you can have a better defense prepared whenever you get the chance to sit down and study with somebody else. And we're going to give you a lot of tools and a lot of tips in the next few videos to show you how you can have those defenses prepared and maybe outlined in a passage. Maybe it's going to be a sheet of paper that's going to be glued into your book. Maybe it's a list of passages that you're going to write out in the back of your Bible. We're going to give you a lot of those things. So whenever someone sits down and asks you for the reason of the hope that you have, you can easily open your Bible and have some of that stuff already outlined for you. The second topic is a bit more personal. The question that comes, how do you overcome your hesitancy? And maybe you grew up and you were gifted a Bible when you were a kid, and your parents were very adamant not to write in it because they knew you being 9 or 10 or 11 were going to just fill it up with drawings and all kinds of things that didn't make sense, and you might regret it later. And maybe that's how you felt as you became a teenager or a little older, where you made some notes and you go back later and think, I just don't know why I put that there in the first place. And you think, if I write it in pen or if I mark it here, then maybe a couple years from now, I'm really going to regret it. So a couple ideas I want to give you. I want to give you 5 different ideas of how to overcome that hesitancy. The first one is think and plan before you mark up your Bible. And that's what these series of videos are all about. We want to have you give forethought to what you're going to do, to have a plan made before you start marking so that you're less likely to regret it later on. Secondly, if you fear regretting your markings, remember that not all markings are ideas or opinions that are written inside the margins. Sometimes people fear that if I make a notation about this passage and I write it in my margins, that maybe in a year or two I'll disagree with my ideas, or maybe I've grown more and I don't want that marking there anymore. And that's where I began just a few years ago. I feared having any of the notations inside of my text that I would regret, something that I may pass down or hand over to somebody else, and they would open up and think, oh, I can't believe that he believes that because it's written there in his margins. And I want to remind you that not all note-taking systems and not all highlighting systems require you to put your personal ideas down in the text. This is one of my older Bibles that I have a variety of different markings in, and if you notice in all of my margins, there isn't any of my opinions throughout this entire section. I have cross-references, I have a theme that runs through sections of Proverbs, but my ideas are not in there. And of all the years of using this system in this Bible and a previous Bible, I've never regretted making those notations because my opinions and my ideas are not in the text. And so while my understanding grows and my feelings about the passages deepen, my notes that I have do not change with that. And that's a great thing. The third thing I would suggest that causes a lot of people anxiety over their markings is to do it neatly. Make it so that it's not distracting and make sure that it's legible. Now, you might do this in a variety of ways. One thing that I will suggest to everybody is to carry a small ruler around with them, and then whenever they mark or whenever they underline or highlight, to make that nice and clean and make sure that it doesn't go through the text. Maybe it's just me and my quirkiness, but I hate when my underlining goes through the text and messes it up, and I regret that immediately. And so I always carry a small little ruler or maybe a business card with me and make those lines really nice and neat. So when I come back later, it's not distracting, it doesn't run through the text, and makes it a lot more legible. The fourth thing that I want to suggest when it comes to overcoming your hesitancy is to make a photocopy of your Bible or a section of text that you want to mark up, and to use that to get an idea of what notes you might want to permanently transfer into your text. I have a good friend of mine who taught me this trick. Whenever he began to study a book with a Bible class, he would make a photocopy of his Bible, a blank section of his Bible, and then hand that out for the class. And he suggested for the class that as they work through the passage, that they highlight and they underline, they make all of their notes in the extra margins that he gave them on the printout, so that they interacted with the passage deeply and intimately through that Bible class. And then, if people like the things that they put in their Bible, then they could transfer that information from a photocopy into their everyday Bible. That allows you to make all of the notes that you might want to make, and then decide later which ones you want to keep permanently and which ones you don't. It helps you to pick out a theme or to figure out what theme is in the book and to work that through and then to transfer just that information into your permanent text. The fifth thing that I would suggest when it comes to overcoming hesitancy is to remember that Bibles are relatively cheap and fairly easily replaced. You know, a really good Bible nowadays probably cost you maybe about $45, $50 if you want to keep just a standard, maybe a Smith-sewn Bible with some decent paper and a nice covering on it. And that isn't overly expensive, and if there's not a note-taking system that you like, or if you do regret it in 4 or 5 years, that it's not the end of the world to pick up a new one. Now, if you really love the format of your Bible and you're afraid that maybe you're going to mess it up, or you're going to mess it up and not like it in a few years, and you hope that, or you're afraid that they are no longer going to have that format in print, you can always buy two and maybe store one away. And then if you find out that you really love your note-taking system, then pull the Bible off the shelf, that backup one, and gift it to somebody. Give it to somebody who you want to study the Bible with. Put a personal note in the front and give them an obligation to read it with you. The sixth thing that I would suggest is to use multiple Bibles for different purposes. And my wife sometimes has the feeling that I have too many Bibles, but I keep on reminding her that I have just the right amount of Bibles. Everyone has their own purpose, and I use them all thoroughly. This one is the one I use for most of my Bible classes. Whenever I have a Bible class, such as in Proverbs or another book, this is pretty much all I bring into Bible class because I made all of my notation, I have all my cross-references, I have all the information that I want to go over in class already in it. And this is my daily workhorse. But this isn't the only Bible. This is my only note-taking system. In the mornings, I've been going through Psalms with my cup of tea or my cup of coffee, and this is what is known as an interleaven Bible or a journaling Bible, where you have one page of text and you have one page that is blank. And every morning I try to sit down with a cup of coffee and one psalm, and I want to write out just kind of all my thoughts on it. Now, this isn't something that is necessarily bound super nice. It is just kind of a cardboard, Smith-sewn book. And this is just one of many that I have that I do the same thing with when it comes to Bible class or just personal reflections, that I can sit down and I can make the notes that I want to, just get my thoughts out on the page, make some marks, not ones that I want to have in my permanent Bible, but just something for me to interact with the Psalms on a daily basis. Maybe you want to have another Bible that is just for worship or just for speaking out of. And I realize I probably should have had this one a bit more accessible. But I recognize that as I was working through my workhorse Bible with all of these notes, that it became a little bit cluttered. Even though I try to be very neat with this, and it works very well for Bible class, I noticed that it became very cluttered as I would go through passages in the Gospels, or I would go through some passages over in Romans or in Corinthians where I have a lot of markings. And so I have a Bible that is primarily and almost completely blank for the purpose of preaching. One that I have that I love the format, I love the size, really nice paper, and I leave it completely blank so whenever I get up and I speak before other people, I'm not distracted by all of my notes, and I can be consumed by the text itself. There's a lot of different Bibles, and they can all serve different purposes. And if you're worried about getting into one Bible and making the wrong notes, recognize that you can use multiple Bibles for different purposes, including leaving one that is completely blank. This series of videos, I hope, is going to be very, very helpful for you. I hope that you can make your Bible your own, that you can make the marks that are going to be important for you, important for teaching other people, that can lay a good solid foundation for understanding the text and understanding the context, so that the next time you go back and you look over the text, you can have a deeper understanding of those passages. Remember that marking helps with memory. It helps with a deeper study as well. It also keeps the study material for another time and keeps it accessible, as well as also having ready-made notes for defense prepared to anybody who asks the reason for the hope that's in you. If you're having a trouble overcoming your hesitancy, then think and plan before you make your first mark in your Bible. If you fear regretting your marks, remember that not every marking system has marks that contain your ideas or your opinions that may change down the road. If you're afraid that it's going to become cluttered and disorganized and maybe a bit ugly, then take your time and to mark neatly. Make sure that it's not distracting. Make sure that it's legible so you can go back and know exactly what you had marked prior. Maybe if you're having a hard time wanting to put notes that are permanent inside of your Bible right now, maybe make a photocopy of that. Mark up the photocopy, really figure out what you want to have permanently in your Bible, and then go back and transfer those notes back in. Remember that Bibles are relatively cheap and pretty easily replaced. We live in one of the most privileged times in all of human history to have our own personal Bibles, to have a plethora of them, and them to be really cheap and really easy to replace. If you're afraid of messing this one up and you really love this format, then buy two, stick one on a shelf, and if you really like what you've done with your Bible, then give the other one away, personally to somebody, and encourage them to study it with you. Remember that you don't have to have one Bible for all purposes. Have multiple Bibles. We look forward to helping you out in the next few videos to begin your Bible marking process and the whole journey that that's involved with. We are really looking forward to you joining us. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.